19th century philosophy, the rise of collectivist ideas.
It's a period of intense intellectual upheaval, a time when the very idea of individual liberty was being questioned and redefined.
It's 1806, Napoleon's army is conquering huge chunks of Europe. But here's the thing, Napoleon himself credited his success, not just to military might, but to the ideas of this philosopher, Rousseau.
And Rousseau is really where things get interesting. He's the one planting those seeds of collectivist thought, right? Questioning this whole idea that the individual is the most important building block of society.
So we've got this tension already, individual versus collective. How does Kant, another giant of philosophy, fit into all of this?
Kant argued that our reason, our ability to think logically, it has limits. We can't truly know the real world, the one beyond our senses, beyond our interpretations.
So if reason has limits, what does that even mean for finding truth?
Some thinkers, they double down on reason, saying even with its flaws, striving for logic, for consistency, that's still the best path. But then you have others who are drawn to this new movement, Romanticism. They're all about feeling, emotion, intuition, yearning for something beyond cold, hard logic.
Like that famous line from Goethe, right? Gray, dear friend, is all theory, but green is life's golden tree. It's like a full-on rebellion against reason.
Exactly. Thinkers like Goethe, they were searching for a more holistic approach, one that honored both reason and emotion. And it's into this whirlwind of ideas that Hegel and Marx emerge, each taking these complex concepts in radical new directions.
Okay, so let's try to unpack this, starting with Hegel. He was wrestling with some heavy stuff. If there's a good God, why is there so much suffering in the world? And he came up with this idea of reason, with a capital R, governing the world. But this wasn't reason in the usual sense, was it?
It's way more abstract, right? Hegel's not just talking about logic or deduction. It's more like this divine force, almost like a cosmic intelligence that's driving history forward.
So all those wars, revolutions, all the chaos, it's all part of some master plan.
That's how Hegel saw it, like a grand, intricate play where even the tragedies, they all serve a purpose in this larger narrative orchestrated by reason. And within this grand scheme, he argued that states, not individuals, they're the main players.
So we're already seeing how different Hegel's worldview is compared to, say, the Enlightenment focus on individual liberty. It's like we're all just actors on a stage following a script we didn't write. But if that's true, if these world historical individuals are just tools of some higher power, can we judge their actions? Are they really morally responsible?
That's a question that Hegel wrestled with. And his answer was complicated. He said, we can't judge them by the same standards of individual morality that we apply to everyday people. Their actions, he believed, need to be understood within this much larger context of historical forces.
Okay, so we've got this almost deterministic view of history, with reason as the puppet master. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, let's bring in Karl Marx. Now, he was heavily influenced by Hegel, but took these ideas in a completely different direction.
Marx agreed that history moves with a certain inevitability, but he wasn't on board with this mystical reason driving it all.
He was much more grounded.
Totally. Marx was all about material forces, economics, technology, the struggle between different classes in society. That's what he saw as the real engine of history.
So instead of some divine plan, we've got material conditions shaping our world.
Exactly. And for Marx, this materialist perspective, it was key to understanding everything, even something as personal as our own consciousness. He believed that our very sense of self is shaped by our relationship to the means of production.
If you're born into poverty, working in a factory, that's going to shape your whole worldview.
Exactly. And conversely, if you're born into wealth and privilege, that's a whole different story, isn't it? And this is where Marx's critique of religion comes in. You know, that famous line, religion is the opiate of the mass. He saw religion as a tool that was used to keep the working class pacified, to make them accept their lot in life.
So instead of trying to change their material conditions, their economic reality, they're told to just accept their suffering, have faith that they'll be rewarded in the afterlife.
Exactly. Marx believed that religion distracted people from the real struggle, the struggle for economic justice. And this is crucial because he rejected this idea that we can simply reason our way to a more just society.
Wait, so if our material conditions shape our consciousness, as Marx is suggesting, does that mean free will is an illusion? And if there's no room for a reasoned debate to change society, does that mean violence is inevitable? Marx seemed to think so, right?
That was his view, yeah. He saw history as this series of class struggles, each era defined by its economic system and this unavoidable conflict between those in power and those without. And whether you agree with his conclusions or not, You can't deny that Marx's ideas have had a huge impact on how we think about history, economics, even power itself. And whether we realize it or not, their ideas continue to influence how we see the world today.
Hegel's got his reason with a capital R, and Marx has this whole material dialectic thing going on. But where does that leave us? Do we even have any real choices in life, or are we just along for the ride?
It's like, how much free will do we really have? Hegel and Marx, they both make you confront this tension between individual action and the sheer weight of history, of economics, of these structures we're born into. And honestly, it's a question that hasn't gotten any less relevant over time. Your little choices, your vote, your habits, they don't add up to much in the grand scheme of things. But here's the thing, both Hegel and Marx, even with their, let's call it, deterministic views, they each had some interesting things to say about individual agency.
How can these guys, who seem to be saying our paths are basically preordained, how can they also talk about us having real choices?
All right, so let's take Hegel first. Remember those world historical individuals he talks about? These are the folks who, through their actions, often on a huge scale, end up changing the entire course of history.
Like Napoleon, he was one of his examples.
Exactly. Now, you might think this just proves we're all puppets. But Hegel adds this twist. He said these world historical individuals, they aren't just mindlessly following a script. They're driven by their passions, their ambitions, their own unique understanding of the world.
They've got their own drives.
Hegel believed that by chasing those drives, even if it's unconsciously, these individuals often end up aligning perfectly with the movement of reason. It's this weird harmony between individual choice and historical necessity.
So they're playing their part in this grand play, but they're also improvising as they go along.
That's a great way to put it. They bring their own style, their own motivations to the stage. And that's where Hegel finds that balance. It's not either you have free will or everything's predetermined. It's both. And look, Hegel's philosophy is notoriously tough to pin down. There are a lot of interpretations. But one way to understand it is this. He's trying to hold these two ideas together. That history does unfold with a certain necessity. But individuals can still make choices that ripple out and matter.
All right, that's starting to make a bit more sense. But what about Marx? He seems even more set in stone than Hegel, with his whole thing about economics being the base of everything.
Marx also believed that consciousness has the power to shape material conditions right back. He said once people become aware of their own oppression, once they develop class consciousness, as he called it, that's when they can start to challenge and change the very system that's oppressing them. Marx believed that through collective action, through revolution even, the working class could toss out the capitalist system and build something more just, more equal. But it's not about one lone hero saving the day.
It's more about we than me.
It's about individuals realizing they've got shared interest, banding together, and fighting for something better. It's less about lone geniuses like Napoleon and more about movements like the labor movement, the civil rights movement, that kind of thing. Both Hegel and Marx, they knew that. Progress, it's messy, it's got these loops and dead ends. Sometimes it takes a detour through a battlefield. Both of them believed that progress, real progress, it usually comes at a price.
That's a tough one to accept. That suffering, even violence, might be the price of admission for a better future.
Think about the French Revolution. Utter chaos. Bloodshed on a massive scale. But it also led to incredible change. Hegel, especially, he grappled with that. How even the most horrific events in history might be, as awful as it sounds, necessary for reason to do its thing.
Makes you think about how we even define progress in the first place.
That's what Hegel and Marx, as different as they were, forced us to confront. What really matters when we talk about moving forward, and whose voices, whose experiences are we leaving out of that conversation?
So much to think about. We've covered a ton of ground here. Collectivism, this whole idea of whether we even have a say in how history unfolds. Big stuff. What do you hope people take away from all this? What's the core message here?
I think the biggest thing is critical thinking. Hegel, Marx, they can be tough to read, but they make you think. They make you question what you assume about the world. And honestly, in a world that's drowning in information, that's more important than ever, right?